All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started with some housekeeping items. Hi, everybody. Welcome to MPG's webinar series. We're thrilled to have you join us. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm glad that you chose this one to get started with us. We're going to go through some additional housekeeping on the next slide regarding tonight's topic. It is an introduction to training for selective mutism treatment. Before we get started, I want you guys to note two things. Our chat is enabled, so you can go ahead and say hello to everybody. But please use the Q&A for any questions that you have for the speakers to ensure that they're seen. Please note, with the volume of people that are attending, we will not be able to get to every question, but we will be answering additional questions on our social media throughout the week. Perfect. And then for those seeking CEUs, so for anybody who is looking for a BACB CEU, we will post two code words that you will need to get your CEUs. We will verbally say them. They will be on the screen. Once we move on, we will not repeat them. You will need to stay for the entire webinar, collect both CEU code words, and complete the post-webinar survey that's shared at the end in order to get your CEU certificate. For New York State psychologist, you do not need to collect the code words, but you do need to complete the post-webinar learning assessment and obtain 100% in order to get your contact hour. The recording, which is also available for CEUs, will be posted within a week. Usually it's a lot faster, and we will be sending an email out to everybody once it's up and ready to go. There will be a recording available, as well as an option to access the CEUs for a fee. We also have the slides now shared on both the psychology and the ABA webinar calendar, and we will also be sharing a link in the chat. And then before we begin on our talk, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. We were established in 2011 by Dr. Joshua Rosenthal and have continued to grow into a team of over 200 dedicated professionals. Our team includes skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, board-certified behavior analysts, special educators, and ABA therapists. As a team, we're committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services, from mental health and testing to ABA and educational. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. Whether you choose in-person consultations at our welcoming locations on the Upper West Side in Manhattan or Long Island City, or the convenience of telehealth, our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages in diverse settings. We are also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals where we will continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. And our mission is to provide multidisciplinary integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. All right. And without further ado, I am so excited to get to introduce our two speakers for tonight, Dr. Chelsey Rosen and Claire Romero. This is a very exciting talk for us at MPG because they are both MPG clinicians from our mental health and our ABA behavioral health side. So starting with Dr. Chelsey Rosen, she's a New York State licensed psychologist and a New York State school psychologist. She received her bachelor's in psychology from the University of Maryland at College Park and her doctoral and master's degrees in school psychology from St. John's University. She completed both her postdoctoral fellowship and clinical internship at Kurtz Psychology Consulting under the direct supervision of Dr. Stephen Kurtz. Dr. Rosen is a certified therapist in parent-child interaction therapy and a selective mutism specialist. She has trained, supervised, and consulted to clinical psychology trainees, licensed psychologists, and various school personnel in various behavioral therapies. In addition to PCIT and selective mutism, Dr. Rosen has expertise in providing evidence-based treatment to children and adolescents from ages 2 to 21. She provides CBT, behavioral parent management training, exposure and response prevention, school and teacher consultations, as well as teacher-child interaction training. She works very closely with various public and private schools in New York City and the surrounding areas, providing consultation, workshops, and live coaching to school personnel on behavioral management skills. Dr. Rosen specializes in working with children, adolescents, and families who have a wide range of emotional and behavioral disorders, including but not limited to anxiety, school refusal, depression, ADHD, ODD, and OCD. She has presented at various conferences on both TPIT and SM, and has provided individual and group therapy for children to build both social and emotional skills. And then on to Claire. Claire is a board-certified behavior analyst, licensed behavior analyst, and a certified special education teacher in New York State. She holds a bachelor's of science in psychology with a minor in psychology of the exceptional child from SUNY Cortland, as well as master of science in early childhood special education from Hunter College. Before joining MPG, Claire began her career over 20 years ago as a home programmer and instructor, providing ABA and educational therapy as a special education itinerant teacher for preschool children, and is also in the title of Assistant Director of Educational ABA Services. She has been an adjunct lecturer for several years, teaching a course to paraprofessionals about ASD in young children. Beginning in 2004, she was the lead behavior consultant for a special needs activity center, overseeing the development and implementation of behavioral goals for participants with various disabilities aged 2 to 21, and providing staff supervision and training regarding behavior intervention. She mostly provides home-based ABA and educational therapy for the children on the autism spectrum, both as a program coordinator supervisor and as a direct service provider throughout New York City and Bergen County, New Jersey. Additionally, she is providing therapeutic services utilizing her behavior background for individuals with selective mutism. Throughout her career, Claire has worked diligently to ensure that all of the children she serves receives an individualized and functional therapeutic program, both in-home and in schools, utilizing a variety of ABA techniques that are naturalistic and play-based. She has conducted skill-based assessments, including the VB MAP, ABLS-R, AFLS, and in order to write goals with a focus on skills that are functional to the individual's life. She has also conducted FBAs in order to develop behavior intervention plans to promote functional communication skills, social interactions, classroom participation, community-based participation, and independent life skills. A focus on collaboration across all environments, home, school, and community, as well as providers from different disciplines, is a major role in ensuring consistent and comprehensive programming. As a sibling of an adult individual on the autism spectrum, Claire recognizes the extreme importance of whole family involvement in the therapeutic program she develops. She conducts parent trainings, incorporates siblings into therapy sessions, and welcomes all other caregivers and family members to be involved at any level they are able to be. It is her passion to ensure that not only the quality of life of the child is improved, but also the whole family through the therapeutic services she provides. And now I will pass it over to Chelsey and Claire.
Thank you, Lakin. So I just want to quickly start before I get into the objectives. Claire and I are so excited to do this presentation. We did a similar one about a year ago. And basically just the history is that I started to train LBAs on selective mutism, and Claire was in the first cohort. And we realized like how much similarity there was between PCIT-SM, which is what we're going to talk about today, and ABA. So a lot of you will be like, oh, I do that already. And then this goal is just to be like, okay, I do this. How can I do it more specifically with kids with selective mutism? And honestly, really all kids and kids with really, it's all over the anxiety spectrum as well. So we're really excited because it's like, you know, in our professional world, when things overlap, it's like, okay, we don't have to learn something new. It's just how do we apply it with adding new things as well. So on that note, our objectives. So we really hope that you learn the key features and the diagnostic criteria for selective mutism. Hopefully you'll be able to identify similarities and differences between autism and selective mutism. So there is a lot of overlap. We also want to identify the importance of collaborating. So again, a lot of this isn't new, but it's super, super important to collaborate, especially with selective mutism, because we're working in all areas of the child's life. Honestly, for all of you, you probably feel this way about every single thing that we work with. We're also going to talk more about data collection that we use in our practice to make sure that we're, you know, keeping data, following, you know, making sure we're making improvements, and really it's about the child and not necessarily just the diagnosis. So, oops, the first thing I want to do is, Lakin, can you just open the poll for who you are? We would love to know who's here today. So I see lots of BCBAs, some speech therapists, that's awesome. A lot of mental health providers. Some students, happy to see some students here. And some parents too. This is awesome. So this presentation will really be tailored to everyone. Like Lakin said, we won't be able to answer all of the questions because we have so much to work on, but we will try to respond to as many as possible, as well as on our social media throughout the week. And we'll also give out our emails. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. So we have lots of different people here, different professionals, parents, students. So we're very happy to have you. All right. So let's start with, what is selective mutism? So selective mutism is the consistent failure to speak in specific social situations where speaking is expected, despite being able to speak in other situations. So it's really, really important that it's not because they're unable to speak, it's because they're unable to speak in specific situations due to anxiety. So I think that's a very important distinction. A lot of things will come up with things about kids who are bilingual or trilingual. They could have selective mutism and be bilingual or trilingual. We just want to make sure that it's not just because they don't feel comfortable speaking in a language. So if English is your second language and you're not speaking English in school, we wouldn't necessarily say that that's selective mutism. We'd really want to dive deeper into that. We would never diagnose this within the first month of school because a lot of kids are actually slow to warm up. This is more than that. So we're always assessing, when did this start? How long has this been happening? So why is it so impairing? So these are all examples of kids that I've treated, that we've treated, that we've seen in our practice. The thing with kids with selective mutism is they often do go under the radar. I am happy to report that since I started doing this, we're getting kids younger and younger. When I started in, I don't remember the year, but a really long time ago, we were getting kids more at 8, 9, 10. Now we're seeing the 3, 4, 5s, which is really amazing because, like everything else, early intervention is best. But the thing with selective mutism is that it's impairing in ways that people don't realize it's impairing. So in school, a lot of teachers will say to me, they're the easiest kids. Like they follow directions, they do what they need to do. And I'm like, yeah, but they're also not talking. So that is really important. I feel like I find myself almost having to advocate a little bit more for these kids than I do with other kids that I work with. What selective mutism is not. So it's not oppositionality. I will admit it often looks like oppositionality because we know this child talks and then they're in a situation and we just want to shake them and be like, just talk. It's not that they're being oppositional. It's really that their anxiety is very high. That being said, we can have kids who have selective mutism and they can be oppositional. So it's hard to tell the distinction. But it's not because they're oppositional. It's not trauma induced, which was a very common, it used to be a myth that people used to think that it really was trauma induced in the past. Autism, it's not autism. It can be comorbid. It's not just being shy. It won't go away on its own. And it's also not the same as social anxiety, although again, it's often a comorbidity. So this is a really fun slide that we just created for this specific webinar. And we took a lot of time to do this, and me and Claire were kind of geeking out before about how we can't wait to use this more, because there's lots of similarities and differences in selective mutism, social anxiety, and autism. So you'll get these slides, but basically the common things that they all have is that they're most commonly diagnosed in childhood. They're typically comorbid. Kids struggle to make eye contact. They might present as behaviorally inhibited in some settings. And then there's all these separate things. So with selective mutism and social anxiety, I'll kind of start with that because those often get diagnosed together. A lot of kids with selective mutism also have social anxiety. But the social piece is really looking at their behavior, right? So a kid with selective mutism, if I were to watch them, just selective mutism, if I were to watch them or observe them in school, you would think that you might not pick up on it unless you're focusing specifically on the verbalization. So selective mutism is really just about verbalizations. The social anxiety piece is about that other piece of it, like difficulty participating in physical activities, movement breaks, gym, music. They may not eat in front of others or use the bathroom. So when you're assessing for this, I think the thing that often goes missed is, like, I always ask on every intake, do they eat in front of others? Do they use the bathroom at school? And parents sometimes look at me like, that's such a weird question to ask, but it's really important because if you find out that they're not eating, and people might not even be looking for it, so we really want to know, it's likely a sign of social anxiety. And then obviously with autism, there's a lot of other things, but there's that overly fixated on certain topics, engage in repetitive behaviors, difficulty using or understanding nonverbal communication. You can read all of those, but the reason why it's not as much anymore, but a lot of kids get misdiagnosed is because, like, if you're just looking at a kid with selective mutism and you're asking them a question, right, they might look away, they might not have eye contact, they might engage in nonverbal behaviors, they might look like they prefer to play alone. There's a lot of that overlap that that we see. So it's important to be able to tease it apart. And again, they could have both or all three, but it's important to figure out like which behavior is what. So here's your first code word. I'll leave that on here for a few seconds.
Yes, please write down the first code word. Code word number 1 is communication. We will not be repeating it after this. So please jot down code word number 1 is communication. It is going to be a multiple choice question. So make sure you remember that this is your first code word.
So happy you chimed in. I was like not even saying it. I thought it was like a secret. I don't know how it works.
No worries.
All right. So code word communication. Please don't forget. All right. So Claire, take it away with the assessment.
I'm sorry, I think you were doing these.
Oh, great. I love
Yes.
assessment. So assessment tools used. So we have the Selective Mutism questionnaire, which was developed by Lindsay Bergman. I think she also developed the school speech questionnaire. And basically, here it is. You give one to the parent and one to the school. So I know all those BCBAs out there, you guys love data collection. So do psychologists, but maybe not as much. But we give these to the school and the parent, and we like to see like what's happening basically. So when appropriate, where do they speak? It's always, often, seldom, never. And we're really trying to figure out, this is a baseline, and then sometimes we do it in the middle of treatment, and then we will do it post-treatment to see the improvement. The good thing about the easier thing for me for selective mutism is that it's actually it's such an observable behavior, right? Talking versus not talking. So a lot of times we forget to give this, but we really want to do it more because we're like, this is obvious. Like I could fill this out at the end of treatment, but we really would like to keep data. So we have this, and then the school speech questionnaire that's specifically for school. And again, it's very short. It's easy for the teachers to fill out. And then the selective mutism bot. So this was developed by Dr. Kurtz, and basically it's the behavioral observation task. And what happens is that you have that we typically try to do this through a one-way mirror, although we've done it virtually and we've done it in person without the mirror. But you put the child and the parent in the room, and you have them have some toys. You observe them alone, see how they're doing. You give them time to warm up, and you're trying to see how much speech is going on without anyone in the room, just the parent and the child. Then we have a stranger come in. The stranger is typically someone we work with. And then they come in and we observe how the child changes with the stranger there. Then the stranger asks a question and the stranger leaves. We then observe the parent and child in the room again to see if anything has changed. Then after that, we observe the parent and child in the room with the stranger again. The stranger then asks a question, and then the stranger leaves, and then we observe separation. So we see if the stranger comes in and the parent leaves for about 3 minutes, how the child responds. If the child's in a lot of distress, we do not make them separate in that moment. We just like to see like what their reaction is, which is very important for the treatment, because a lot of the treatment is fading, and we'll talk about that, the parent out. And so we want to know ahead of time, like, is that going to be hard for the child if the parent leaves? So here's a poll. What kind of research design do you think this is?
Looks like most people are getting it, which is great. I know it's a little tricky because we threw that like separation piece in there, but this really doesn't consider the separation piece. But
that was a
yeah. It's almost a little trick, but yeah, so this is great. It looks like majority of you have picked the right one. Are we going to end the poll? Yeah, let's end it. So yeah, so A, right? So it's that, you know, that baseline of the parent with the child alone, then adding the stranger, that's part B. Then we go back to baseline, and then put our intervention in again with our stranger. Good job.
Good job, everyone. So this is just like an example of the coding system, and the sample. This is the coding sheet. So we're looking at what type of questions that they're asking. how often they're waiting, how long they're waiting for the child to respond. If they're verbal, barely audible, nonverbal, no response, we're really looking at everything. And this is really helpful to see from the beginning to the end. So I actually often will show parents this, and it will be like pretty crazy where they come in and you're like, I could have, I tracked, let's say, 5 verbalizations in an hour period. And then they, at the end of, our sessions, it's kind of even awkward. The parents say, it's so awkward for you to do this because like they're just talking. And so but it's a really good way to see, like, again, being able to measure. One thing actually that's on the Selective Mutism bot that I don't think I mentioned before is that we have them do a cleanup. And basically we're just looking for defiance separate from the Selective Mutism. Now, kids don't always clean up. So just because the child didn't clean up during this observation does not mean that they're an oppositional kid. But it's nice to see, like, we're just trying to get a little bit more information. And this also, the Selective Mutism bot baseline observation task, it comes after a full intake. So this is just the observation after we've already spoken to the parents for a while and read all the records and spoke to other professionals. So how is Selective Mutism maintained? So this was Dr. Kurtz, has this slide on his training that I find to be super, super helpful. And I think if you're going to get anything out of today, I mean, I hope there's a lot more, but this is how anxiety in general is maintained. And it's super, super important to go over this with the parents and also any other professionals working with the child. So whether it's the teacher, the psychologist, the speech therapist, everyone really should understand or grasp this, because basically it starts with this. Child is prompted to talk or engage. So child is 2 years old, 2.5, and they're at the supermarket with their mom, and someone says, oh my goodness, you're so cute, what's your name? Child gets extremely anxious, right? The anxiety level goes up. Child hides behind mom. Mom gets super anxious, because who wouldn't? Child avoids, right? So she doesn't answer the question. Adult rescue. So adult might say, oh, this is Chelsey. Child's anxiety is lowered and adult's anxiety is lowered. And then it's that negative reinforcement cycle. Then child goes to preschool. Teacher says, oh my goodness, Chelsey, we're so happy to have you here today. What did you do over the summer? Child avoids. Teacher gets anxious. Parent gets anxious. Adult says, oh, she went to camp. She loved it. Anxiety is lowered. Child goes to gym. Music class. I mean, you see the pattern. It's this negative reinforcement. And so our job is to break this cycle. And the reason why I say this is one of the most important things to learn is because if we don't break the cycle, child will, I'm not saying they'll never talk, but it will be much harder. Because if something is super hard for you and you're able to get it without using your words, which is the hardest thing for you to do, you're likely going to take option B, right? Rather than speaking, if you're anxious about it, you'd rather do any other thing, pointing, nodding, like anything that you can think of. So just thinking about this, like, we just really want to decrease that avoidance and really prompt them and give them the opportunity to speak.
Okay, so what we do is we provide PCIT DSM. So this is parent-child interaction therapy for selective mutism. This was developed by Dr. Stephen Kurtz. And let's get into what that is. So PCIT DSM will provide opportunities to practice being brave in different situations. We are going to scaffold and slowly increase difficulty. We're going to increase that distress tolerance for both the kids and the adults, because this is also just stressful for the parents. Oftentimes parents also have anxiety disorders. So this is anxiety provoking for both of them oftentimes. Our therapy goals and directions will vary from kid to kid. We highly individualize what we're doing with each of our clients. Transparency is key. We are always going to let our clients know what we're doing, what the steps we're taking. We're not going to surprise them with anything. We're not going to just throw them into a highly anxious situation and hope they swim instead of sink. We want to make sure that they're mentally prepared, that they are, their anxiety is not increased and heightened, and that we're working together as a team. And sometimes this will require medication along with treatment. We don't jump straight to medication. We want to make sure that we go through all of our therapy goals first and really put in a lot of effort before we get to medication. But there are times when the child or adult's anxiety is just too high and too much to manage, and they need a little bit of that edge taken off so that the therapy could be more effective. So just in this quick little intro, what ABA connections do you see? Type it in the chat box. As I did this training with Chelsey when I was first learning, and she's going through these things, and I'm like, oh, well, that's, yes, shaping. That's, what else are we seeing here? Fading.
Love this participation. This is
yeah,
awesome.
I love all this. There's generalization. There's, yes, exactly. So I'm like, wow, this is fading. Reinforcement. Yes, absolutely. Individualized therapy, differential reinforcement. Yes, exactly. This is all amazing. Behavior momentum is definitely, I'm going to be talking about that as well. Great. Yes. So as she's going through all of these things, I'm like, wow, you know, my mind was this chat box right now. It was like, oh, this is this and this is that. And it's like, wow, this is actually very, very similar to what I already am trained in. So it's a perfect marriage. So the treatment goals for PCIT SM, we want to increase verbalizations to as many people as possible and as many places as possible. That's that generalization piece, right? We want to make sure that this client can go anywhere and speak to anybody. We want the child is going to be able to participate in any activity they actually want to participate in. And like Chelsey said earlier, they're not choosing to be oppositional. Oftentimes they want to talk, they want to participate, but they are so frozen in their anxiety that they actually can't. And we're going to make sure we're decreasing that avoidance and enabling. We're going to work against that negative reinforcement cycle. We're going to flip it on its head, and we're going to work using positive reinforcement systems. Okay, so a typical treatment plan, like Chelsey said, we start with an intake. She gets on with the parents. She asks a ton of questions. Whenever possible, I join and I observe and I take my own notes. And it's good to get kind of that background information of the type of client that we're going to be interacting with. Then we conduct that SM bot. That's that baseline observation. This is usually done in our office in Manhattan. We have a one-way mirror and we have headphone system, so I can relay information to the parent as needed, just so, you know, again, we're transparent. She knows or he knows what's coming. And I can maybe guide them through the process a bit. And I'm taking my data from behind the screen or behind the mirror window. Because it's important. We want to see what these kids look like as their little chatterboxes. What do they look like when they're not anxious and when they are their true selves? Then we get on and we do a virtual training, very similar to kind of what we're doing right now with our parents. And we do a training on SM skills. We're going to talk about CDI and VDI. And then we do intensive treatment sessions. And these are coaching sessions, which again, whenever possible, we like to do these at the office because we have that system with the one-way mirror and the headphones. So we can I can coach, and I coach based on what I saw during that SM bot. Where do these parents need some work? What kind of skills are they going to need to learn? And we try to do a couple of those very close in time, at least within the same week, if we can, within of the 2 to 3 days of each other. Next, then we'll conduct fade-ins. Fade-ins, Chelsey will get into in a little bit, but essentially the main purpose of the fade-in is so me as the clinician can get in there and make sure that the client will speak to me. So then I can then help transfer skills in other areas. Once we are faded in, then we do that same virtual training with the teachers, because 99.9% of the time, I would say, or Chelsey might even say 100%. I don't know. That we're going to the schools. They need help at school. This is a big deal. So we are going to do the same training with the teachers. They're going to learn what SM is, what this PCIT SM is, what's going to be involved with CDI and VDI, and kind of what the process is going to look like. Then we'll start those school visits where I'm going to go and do the coaching. It's all done in person. And then the point is for me to teach them what to do, and I can get out. This is supposed to be, I like to say it's kind of like heavy loaded on the front. It's there's a lot in the beginning with a client, and then we try to back up as much as possible, as quick as possible, so that the people who are in these kids' lives are the ones who are actually doing the therapy moving forward. And then we can do consultation visits and stuff like that. And then we're going to also do community exposure. So we'll do coaching with the parents and family members and neighbors and friends and play dates and whoever and wherever is necessary for each individual client.
I just want to jump in real quick. So this is a typical treatment plan. Sometimes we can't get into the school, right? Ideally, we would love to get into the school. Like we work one-on-one with them. Like we're constantly using these skills all day, every day with them. But a lot of times we can't, or we have clients from out of state or upstate or far away that we can't get in there. So a lot of times we will do these virtual, and we can, and it is very effective. That being said, like we would prefer if we can get into the school, just because it typically works faster because we are the ones that are doing it and the teachers watch us. But it's very possible, and honestly, I would say actually right now I feel like many of my SM clients are virtual, and we're working with the school virtually, which is pretty cool that we can do that.
Great. So let's talk about what CDI is. That's a child-directed interaction. So this is a warm-up. This is when we're going to follow the child's lead. We're going to incorporate pride skills, which I'll get into in a minute. This is helping the children learn how to self-regulate. And this is a time where there's no questions or commands. We want this to be fun. We want this to be enjoyable. And we want to relationship build. So pride stands for praise, reflect, imitate, descriptions, and enjoyment. Pairing, yes, thank you for that. Oh, wait, go back.
Oh.
Go back. Go through what each one is. Okay, so praise, labeled praise. You know, us BCBAs in our ABA world, we call this behavior specific praise. It's the same thing. We're going to really define our praise and be very specific about what we're praising with the kids, which is speaking, right? Most of the time, right? We're going to reflect. Reflect means we're going to repeat back what the kids are saying. If they say anything during this time, again, it's not required, but we find that often because it's fun and relaxing, a lot of times that they will talk, you know, we're paired, we're in there, they speak to us, and they might just naturally and spontaneously talk. Great. Whenever they do, we're going to repeat back what they said. And I always follow that up with that labeled praise. So if we're playing, you know, with cars and the kid says, it's going up the ramp. And I'm like, it is going up the ramp. Thank you for telling me that was such great, brave talking. There's that labeled praise. You are doing great, brave talking. You say brave talking a lot. And we're going to imitate. We're going to imitate what they're doing. We're going to be engaged in the play. We want to make sure their play is valuable. And that it keeps us interested too and engaged with the kids. We're going to describe their behaviors. I like to say this is like sports casting, and I know this is like big football time right now. So, you know, and you hear, you know, the sportscaster saying every little thing that's happening on the field. We are saying every little thing that's happening during this play. You're putting the yellow block on the blue block, and now the red car just passed the blue car, and oh, I see you're drawing a big, beautiful purple flower. So we're just going to model language and keep that going. Let them hear what they're doing. It's validating what they're doing, and it's validating the use of and the importance of language. And the last part, enjoyment. Again, this is fun. We want the child to have fun. We want to have fun. It keeps us all engaged. It keeps that pairing process going. It keeps us, you know, developing good relationships with the kids and kind of build up that behavior momentum.
Just one thing to add about the descriptions is if you've ever worked with a child with selective mutism, and you're with them and they're not talking, which is very often, it gets weird. It gets awkward. What, like, teachers will say to me, I don't know how to play with them because how do I fill this time? Like, usually as adults, the way we play is, so what are you doing this weekend? Oh my goodness, what's your favorite game? What's your favorite? Do you like Barbies? Do you like Legos? Right? That's just what we do. And so with the description specifically, it actually gives you a tool to fill that time. So not only is it making the play more fun, it's also making it less awkward, honestly. And it's really
Right.
cute because you can see kids, and Claire, I know we've talked about this, that once they got into once you're in the middle of treatment, you'll see kids as soon as you go into your CDI skills, they'll take a breath and they'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
my teachers might not ask me questions right now. And it's
Right.
really how they start to pick up on it.
Yeah, and I've even found myself doing this in my ABA work with my autistic kiddos. And I work with a lot of kids who are nonverbal and they're not speaking. So this is natural to me. And I just find myself kind of doing this CDI with my other kids anyway. So our second code word is pride, Pride, pride. Go ahead, write that down. Give it a few seconds. Okay, so again, during CDI, verbalizations are not required, but if they happen, and this actually applies to once we start throughout the entire process with these kids, any verbalization that occurs, we're going to reflect and do label praise. So we're going to repeat it back, we're going to echo them, and we're going to provide that behavior specific phrase. We will also work in a positive reinforcement system. We'll give stickers. We'll for the younger kids, typically love stickers, and we fill up a paper and they put them on their walls at home. Or older kiddos, not so into stickers, then we'll use brave talking points or like a token system where they are, working towards earning some sort of prize. So, of course, when we're working with positive reinforcement, we're working on shaping more talking. We're going to eventually fade out these stickers. These are not like, I know sometimes when I started with schools and I'm sticker, 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 teachers are looking at me all like big eye, like, oh my gosh, am I have to do this forever? No, you just have to do this for this first step. Once they're solid and they're solid talking to you, the stickers are going to stop and we're going to move the stickers on for specific goals like asking for help or talking to peers, raising for hand in class. And then once they're asking for help or talking to peers, then we'll move it to the next goal. So they're not always stuck getting stickers in phases where they're now confident and speaking. What we're not going to do is we're not going to ask questions. Because again, we're not going to force that time to speak. We're not going to mind read. We're not going to assume anything that that the kids or our clients are feeling. We're not going to give any sort of commands, and we won't attend to negative behavior. We're not. We are, as BCBAs, we are masters at extinction and planned ignoring. So that's what we're going to do if that happens. I personally have not really seen it happen, but I know it can. Okay, so the next phase is verbal directed interaction, VDI. And this is now where we're going to start to prompt the child to speak. But we're always going to continue with those CDI skills. Those never stop. We're still doing all those pride skills. We're all still doing our labeled praise. We're still doing our reflections. We're still imitating. We're still describing our behavior, and we're still having fun with that enjoyment. So these questions we're gonna warm them up. We like to say maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the least, maybe 15 if you have a little bit more time. Get them warmed up, make sure that everyone's having fun, and then you're going to start asking some questions. We're going to move into the VDI phase. Typically, we'll start with forced choice questions. This is when the answer is in the question. Do you want to play with blocks or color? Is it green or yellow or something else? That something else gives them an out if they don't necessarily can't necessarily answer the question. So these are typically easier for kids with selective mutism to answer because the answer is already in the question. So they don't have to process and think and come up with that on their own, like an open-ended question, like what do you want to play? What color is this? That involves a little bit more thinking. This could be a little bit more anxiety provoking. So we want to make sure we start with those forced choice questions, get them really solid answering those. We're building behavior momentum, and then we'll start throwing some open-ended questions in there. Again, making sure we're still attending to CDI skills. We can also start doing some direct commands. Tell Chelsey what game you want to play. Tell me if this is green or yellow. So they are being commanded to say something, and it's not just answering questions. They're not just waiting to be asked a question. And we're going to avoid yes/no questions. Why? Because this allows them to respond non-verbally by nodding or shaking their head. I will later tell you what happens if we actually come across, now I'll tell you what happens if we come across yes/no questions. So an effective VDI sequence looks hopefully something like this, right? So the most effective is we give that forced choice or open-ended question and or a direct verbal command, or there's some sort of prompt for verbalization. There's that verbal response, and then there's a reflection or label praise. I want to note, you see at the top there, it says wait 5 seconds. So every time we ask a question or give a verbal command or some sort of prompt, we're going to wait 5 seconds. We want to give that kid some time to process, to think, to reduce that anxiety that might start bubbling because, oh my gosh, now I have to speak. So we want to give them a little bit of time. And sometimes it does take them that full 5 seconds. I'm counting to 5 in my head, and I get to 5 and then they answer. So we want to make sure we give them that time. Sometimes they'll answer right away. As they become more confident, you'll see the responses happen a lot faster. And so when you don't wait the 5 seconds and you just ask, then that's just going to increase their anxiety, increases your anxiety, increases anyone else's anxiety that's watching this. It's like, well, they're not talking. Okay. Sometimes we're going to have that prompt for verbalization and there's going to be no response. We waited the 5 seconds, they don't respond. They just look at you blankly, they ignore. What do you do? We're going to reformat or repeat the question. Is this yellow or green? They didn't answer after 5 seconds. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try again. Is this yellow or green? Maybe they still didn't answer. I'm going to reformat it. Is this yellow, green, or I'm not sure? A lot of times they'll take that I'm not sure option just to get out. And that's fine because they answered and they used language. We reflect back. I'm not sure. Great. Thank you for telling me. Great, brave talking. Here's your point. Here's your check. Here's your sticker. So even though it had to be repeated or reformatted, they're still going to get that positive reinforcement for speaking. Sometimes we get a nonverbal response. Maybe they gesture, they point, they nod, they try to write an answer. So we're going to acknowledge and say, oh, I see you're nodding your head, or I see you're pointing to this block here. Was it yellow or green? So we're going to prompt for that verbal in a neutral way. And then we might get that, no response, nonverbal response again. After 5 seconds, we'll go to plan B. Plan B is we're going to go back a step to where they were last successful. And maybe that is CDI, right? If we are working on forced choice questions, all right, let's go back. Let's do some CDI. Let's build some behavioral momentum and go back to it in a few minutes. And we'll try again. But if we do acknowledge the gesture, we repeat the question, we get the verbal response, we reflect, label, praise, they get their reinforcement in whatever way it is designed for them, and we move on and we keep going. What we're not going to do during VDI is give indirect commands to talk. And I'd say BCBAs are often actually very good at this as well. We're not going to give them an out. So can you tell Chelsey what color this is? They can shake their head no. They can just ignore. It's like, okay. So we're just going to make sure we're always going to format that in a direct command. And we're not going to do rapid fire questions. So not only are, we're waiting those 5 seconds to make sure we're not rapidly fire in that way, we're also not going to ask a forced choice question, ask a forced choice, ask a forced choice, and just do them back to back to back. We want to make sure that we're always building in CDI time between these verbal prompts. At times we might decrease the time of CDI to build that behavioral momentum, in particular when we're working towards something a little bit harder, like maybe open-ended questions. So maybe I'll decrease that CDI time and ask my forced choice questions a little bit closer together, but they're not going to be back to back to back to back. because again, we want to make sure that their anxiety is level, they're successful, and we're moving forward. And we're also not going to enable. We're not going to thank you. We're not going to enable and perpetuate that negative reinforcement cycle. So there is a difference between enabling and accommodating, because sometimes we do need to accommodate. We need to meet the child where they are. We need to scaffold. We need to help them be successful. That's accommodating. So maybe in a situation where we're going out into the community and a child is ordering an ice cream, and our goal is for the child to order directly to the cashier, but they're at a place where they're most successful answering the question of what they want to order in front of the cashier, but maybe to me as the clinician. If that's where they are right now, that's what we're gonna scaffold to. That's where we're going to shape it to. That's where we're going to reinforce it. But we're gonna keep working towards and practicing so that they do eventually order directly from the cashier themselves. Enabling is that cycle that Chelsey talked to before. It's that rescuing of the child. It's also staying on the same step for too long and not moving forward. It's always like, well, I guess she's always just going to have to order from the cashier in front of them, but like answering to mom or dad or to the clinician. That ends up becoming enabling if it stays on that step for too long. And it contributes to the anxious avoidance. Again, that negative reinforcement cycle. So what is accommodating to one kid may be enabling to another. This is where the individuality of what we're doing is super, super important. And also what is accommodating to one kid, like the example I said before, will become enabling in the future if we don't move it forward, and we keep them in that state that's not to the end goal. Okay, so here's another poll. What ABA connections do you see now in this accommodating versus enabling? We have task analysis and negative reinforcement. We have shaping and negative reinforcement, shaping, positive reinforcement, and negative reinforcement, shaping, task analysis, and positive reinforcement. What do you guys think? Oh, it looks like our poll didn't get super updated, but that's okay. I can line them up. Good. Thank you guys for participating.
This is amazing. I love the participation.
Yeah, I'm sorry that this didn't get, I had updated on the slide, and I'm sorry it didn't get updated on this, that you guys are answering at the moment. But if you match it up, the A, B, C, and D to the slide, then you'll see which one you should pick. I did a little bit of editing earlier. So this is my fault. But okay, great. So it looks like a lot of you are really on target here. If we kind of add in the poll that you guys got, the first one and the second and the third one, yes, shaping, positive reinforcement, and negative reinforcement is all being looked at here. Thank you so much, guys.
Nice work.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, so just noting the time because we always have so much to share. And
I know.
So I'm going to talk about fade-ins real quick. And so Claire alluded to them a little bit before, is how do we get a child to talk to us, right? This child has never spoken to anyone outside of their family, and now they're coming to therapy, to treatment, and parents will say like, and do you really think, like, what magic wand do you have? Well, we don't have a magic wand, but we are very systematic in the way that we work. So what typically happens is child and familiar adult are playing alone. So child and parent typically are playing alone. Parents are trained on this, right? They're doing all the CDI and BDI skills. We are coaching them, whether it's behind a one-way mirror, whether it's behind their ear, whether it's we're calling them on the phone, they have a headset in and we're outside the door. The parents is reinforcing the child with all the reflections, like the phrases, all the stickers. Once they're doing that comfortably, the new adult enters the room. Typically, we start with a stranger. So what that means is someone that we work with, that's not us. The adult pretends to do something else. So maybe the parents are drawing with the child on the table. The stranger like plays with the blocks on the floor. they're playing with something else. The parent is continuing to reinforce the child and ask questions. Once the child is continuously answering in that situation, the new adult, the stranger, will approach and join the play and gradually start using CDI. Parents will continue to ask the questions and will actually say, like, thank you for telling me with Claire sitting right here, or thank you for telling me with Claire in the room. Again, we're transparent. This is not a trick. We're letting them know what we're working on, that there's someone else in the room. Then the familiar adult continues to prompt. We repeat this several times. The new adult, the stranger, prompts. Hopefully the child answers. They reinforce it. They do this a few times, and then the parent leaves. The first fade-in is very long, typically. Like, I shouldn't say very long. It could be, we don't know, it could be 30 minutes. It could be up to 3 hours over 2 days. You just don't know. And we're always backing it up and moving it forward. That's also why we take an intensive approach, is because if we just did this once a week, by the time the child got comfortable, they would leave. It would all kind of go away. And then they'd come back and we'd have to work it up. So we typically would do a more of intensive approach where we're doing multiple hours across multiple days. And then this is what we do with the teachers and the friends and everyone that we want the child to talk to. Now, I will say what the best part about this is that once the child talks to a stranger and then they talk to another stranger, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So like the first teacher we do this with at school, it's usually the longest. Then you don't have to do fade-ins all the time. It's not like every new person that this kid meets for the rest of their life, we're doing a fade-in. So exposures is having the child do the very thing they're afraid of doing, right? So they're afraid of talking, so let's help them talk, right? So we're doing exposures to increase that and to promote the generalization. They're also increasing the self-efficacy, right? So if you're the child who doesn't talk, everyone knows you're the child that doesn't talk. So then it becomes this like, it's so hard, I can't do it. And then once you do it, we say like the floodgates open. It's actually pretty cool. One other clinician we were working with shared with me yesterday that she overheard, she was in the other room and she overheard her telling her mom when she went to the bathroom, like, can you believe it? Like, I used to be so afraid of talking, and now can you believe I'm talking? And it's like, it's really sweet. Like, it's the best. We just love it. You can tell we're kind of nerds for this because you're building that belief that they can do it. Okay, so just real quick, Claire, you want to do this one? You want me to do it? Okay. So examples of goals for show and tell. So we really work up that scaffolding. I'm sorry that I'm sort of rushing. I just want to leave time for some questions. So we start really small. So if, let's say, show and tell is what they're doing at school, what we might do, the first step is we write out the show and tell outline with the parents at home, and then the teacher reads it in front of the class. The next one would be they practice show and tell with the teacher in the classroom alone. The third one would be practicing show and tell with one teacher and one peer in the classroom. Then show and tell in front of 1 to 2 peers, and then show and tell in front of the whole class. So what we were talking about with accommodating and enabling, this is an accommodation. So for a kid to write out show and tell, they're not like the teacher's not saying you don't have to do it because it's too hard. They're saying you have to do it, but we'll meet you where you're at, and this is how you can do it. Once the child is able to do it in front of the teacher, that becomes enabling. So we wouldn't allow that. We wouldn't say like, yeah, she can do it at home. It would more be like, nope, that's not an option anymore. Here you go, Claire. Sorry, I was off.
No, that was great. And then really, really fast. How are some ways that we can take some data collection? So like you saw earlier, we have that SM-Bot. That's our behavior observation tool. It's used for our baseline with the parent. It's used to guide our training. That's when we're seeing the true child. So we're taking our data, we're setting our goals for coaching and training of the parents, and we're seeing what it is that these kids are actually capable of. Another thing we use, and I'll show you in a second. Oh, here it is. Thank you. Is the you can go back. Yes, the SM skills coding sheets. So we can take skills during CDI and the VDI times. So these are just tallies. It's really easy. You know, and we're taking this not on the kids right now. This is actually on the people that we're coaching. So are they providing behavior descriptions? Are they reflecting? Are they doing labeled praises? We want to make sure we see those do skills increasing. And those don't behaviors, questions, commands, and negative talk, during CDI time, decreasing or being at 0. And again, also during VDI time, we want to see those valid sequences increasing. So this is the data on the child now. So did the child verbalize after the prompt? Did the and then followed up with, did the person who was with them, if the teacher, the parent, did they provide the reflection and labeled praise? And did they get their reinforcement if reinforcement's still in place? Versus an invalid sequence where maybe they didn't wait the 5 seconds, or they didn't answer verbally, they used a nonverbal gesture, or they didn't answer at all. So we're tracking those forced choice open-ended. And we have yes, no on here as well, because we actually want to make sure we don't see this happening. And if it is happening, we can make sure we're continuing to guide our coaching to work towards not asking yes, no questions. Now, I will say they do still happen, especially with teachers. I find it's really hard to get out of the habit of not asking yes, no questions. But our biggest tip is, if you find yourself asking a yes, no question, is this a flower or a shirt? You can quickly add in another option to make it a forced choice question. And you can fix it that way. Also, I have seen, in particular with my last client that I have worked closely with, that the teachers, as much as I coached them on this, they continued to ask yes, no questions, but the child was actually verbalizing yes and no. So I was kind of like, okay, they're reflecting, they're label praising, he's getting reinforcement, he's verbalizing. So at that point, I didn't harp on it too much, but I did give reminders. Really try to make sure that you're staying away from yes, no questions, just in case you see those gestures happening. If they do happen to nod or shake their head, it's like, oh, I see that you're nodding or you're shaking your head. Was that yes or no? So then you can still make it a forced choice question. So you go back a second, Chelsey, back to the other one. Back one more. Yes. So we can graph those results. We can look for those upward and downward trends, and nerd out and geek out, as us PCITs love to do. Data is our life. Is we can give these SM questionnaires throughout treatment that Chelsey talked about earlier. They're really simple, they're really quick. Maybe you give them monthly or, biweekly or whatever it is. It depends, I guess, on how quickly the child is progressing through treatment. But you can also compare that to see, results to baseline, how their progress is looking. And if there's any other ideas, feel free to throw them in the chat box and share. I know that BCBAs are incredible at thinking of new and intuitive ways to take data. But right now we just have a very, very simple process. It just keeps it easy. As you find as you're doing this, especially as they're talking, it's like really quick. You're tally. So tallying is the way to go. You can even get those little golf counters and click as well to take your data. So great. Thank you guys so much. Those are our references, and
if anyone has interest in getting more in-depth training, we are starting to offer some selective mutism training opportunities where you'll get coached, you'll get trained, and you'll get, we're doing a lot of different options. So please, if you feel like that's something you want, just click the link in the chat box, because we're excited to have you.
Perfect. And then for everybody who attended, you will also get an email. I shared a couple links to the CEU quizzes in the chat. I see that there's a lot of activity going on, so you may have missed it. There will be an email going out to everybody with a link to each CEU quiz, as well as a link to fill out the form if you're interested in selective mutism training. Awesome.
You think we have time for one question or no?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to, you are more than welcome to. We will also be collecting all the questions that were posted, and I'll share it.
I'm game. Thank you, everybody, for this feedback. This is great. So, and hi, Mary. Hi, Brittany. Some of my old coworkers are here. So this is great.
I'm just going to ask the first question, answer the first question. When students become upset and go mute, does that count, or is that different? Do they need to be quiet in certain situations all the time? So I think that's a very, very, very good question. And oftentimes I'll say like, well, what specific situation are they going mute, right? Like if they're going mute every time that they're upset, right? That is selective, and it's probably not the same thing every time, right? You'll probably find it in different situations. That being said, even if kids don't meet criteria for selective mutism, and I think this is super important, we treat the behavior, not necessarily the diagnosis. So I would say, let's say that's the situation, do it. Go for the treatment. There's so many times where kids will come in, they're like on the cusp, and teachers will say, well, or someone else will say, well, did they get the diagnosis? And I'll kind of go back and forth and I'll say, you know what, right now, I have to do a little bit more observation, but we're starting, we're doing the treatment, because whether or not they meet criteria for selective mutism, this will help them not go mute in those situations. And Claire, if you want to answer one question, I know it's 9:01.
Oh, no, I'm fine. Okay, this is a good one. If a child already has a diagnosis of autism, verbal higher functioning, how can you determine comorbid social anxiety versus selective mutism? So the best way to determine this is you're looking at how do they speak when they're at home, when they're most comfortable with their parents versus how they speak when they're at school. If they are speaking in one environment and not at all another, we have most likely selective mutism going on as well. Chelsey, do you want to talk a little bit more about the comorbidity with the social anxiety?
So again, the social anxiety piece, we're really looking at, is it verbal or not? So a lot of kids that have social anxiety often look like they have selective mutism, but they're talking, right? They might only be answering one word. And again, I know I said this before, I would still use these skills with a kid with social anxiety, even if they don't meet criteria for selective mutism, because we don't just want one word answers. We want to help them expand on that. But really, with just selective mutism, we're really looking at the verbalization. And is it because they don't know the verbalization, right? So if you see, like I said before with the language, if you see a child isn't speaking in English but is speaking in Spanish, still could have selective mutism, but you need to know, do they know how to speak English, right? Is it broken English? Is it like, you need to know what their comfort level is with that. So again, selective mutism is really that verbalization piece.
Right.
And then last one, real quickly, Rebecca, I see you said, how do you address when the child only speaks in the home? This is such a good question. A lot of these kids only speak in the home, but if we take them, and this is why the one-way mirror thing is so helpful, because most of them will speak to their parents alone in that room. Don't forget, they don't typically know that we're behind the mirror. And so they will speak as if they're at home, if they're just with their mom. Remember, there's no one else in the room but them at first, and that's how we're assessing it. We have had situations where the kids do not speak at all when they're outside of the home. And if that's the case, we'll try to do an observation virtually, where we'll tell the parent, just put the computer down and just turn off the screen. And I mean, we'll turn off our camera. And then we typically do hear some verbalizations. Now, if we don't hear any, then I think we can say that they meet criteria for selective mutism, and that's when we would really teach the parents these skills, even without hearing the child speak. But it's a great question, and I think that's why we really love having that one-way mirror. Again, it's a privilege to have it. I know not everyone does, so we do find other ways, but for me, I find it much easier because it's that, like, we're kind of accounting for all of these variables. Like, there's no one else there with them.
Can I actually answer one more just to give another a BCBA answer for a question? Mary had asked, do you do a preference assessment before the treatment? This is something us BCBAs do. Have you encountered clients that do not like verbal praise? So yes, absolutely. There are definitely kids that sometimes that verbal praise, especially if it's really loud, it's drawing attention to them, that might be triggering some social anxiety. So we might do it a little bit quieter. We might be maybe a pat on the back, a thumbs up, a wink, something that's a little less obvious, but they're still getting some sort of praise and acknowledgement for working on their brave talking. And a preference assessment, I don't do want a preference assessment, but I do ask the family in particular, the first time before we even meet to come in for the SM bot, what are some things that they like to play with? What are some things that they really enjoy doing? Because we want to make sure that they are having fun and enjoying the process. And the parents are always going to be a part of the reinforcement process of especially if we're doing more of a token system as a reinforcement system, of things that they can work for. So like, what are some options that we can have that they're super motivated by? Or sometimes we might even ask the clients themselves if they're, especially if they're a little bit older, what are some things that you want to work for? And we kind of just get their input on that, but not like a preference assessment as we would do maybe with a client with autism. But thank you guys these are so many great questions as I'm like scrolling through them.
Yeah, and Lakin, you'll have all those questions and I'll send them to us, and I want to answer all of them, but also
I know.
Awesome. I will stay on for a few more minutes to support with anything related to CEUs, certificates. But if you guys don't have anything else, I will let you go. Thank you both so much for your presentation. We got a lot of great feedback. I know it was very helpful and informative for everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all for being so engaged. I love
it.
This
is great.
So much better. And hope to see you all soon.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.